Welcome to the very first episode of the story I'm telling myself. I'm so excited to have you with me, Karen. Welcome, all of my listeners. Look, we have the comments section open. So if you are joining us, we hope that you'll jump in the comments, say hello, let us know that you are here. And Karen, I'm going to let you give your brief intro to everybody. Tell everybody why they need to know you.
Sure. Well, many years ago, I was tongue-tied in a boardroom, even though I was in a leadership role in the company. And it was so embarrassing because I couldn't get the words out. My boss actually shut down the meeting and she pulled me aside and she goes, "Karen, you didn't trust your gut." She goes, "You could have just tabled the meeting." And I remember thinking, what? I could have just tabled the meeting. And then the second part of that was, why do I keep asking for permission? And the thing is, I had an internal conflict with my boss on what she asked me to present, but I was taught you don't question your boss, you just do what they say. And that was when I set out to change and figure out what the root of my problem was, related to the story I'm telling myself, by the way, and figured out the root of that and realized that I was actually in a prison of my own making because of that fear of doubt and specifically rocking the boat. So,
right? I mean, look, if you're listening, how many of you out there listening to this have been in that moment Karen just described? Right? I mean, I know it's got to be a lot of people, Karen. I know it's not. I've had those moments of feeling like here I am at this pivotal moment and I'm bombing myself in as much as anybody, anything else. And it's just the worst feeling.
I know it is.
So tell us about the story you were telling yourself in that moment.
Yeah, the story I was telling myself is that I better not speak up because my boss won't approve of me, honestly. And that was when I realized, why do I keep doing this? And from that moment, I did lots of personal growth work, personal therapy, like all these things to figure out what the issue was. And interestingly enough, it turns out that my boss, I ended up realizing she was the archetype of my dad. And it was crazy how that came together. And so what I want to remind everybody listening is that there are times where, like, for example, I was completely confident. I mean, I was coaching people, like the head people at Google, to do their big presentations at their Google Live marketing event. I was coaching people at Sephora and NASA, all these places. And yet there are times where we are in certain situations or we're in front of certain people that we feel that intimidation and that gets in our way. And so my goal is to eradicate self-doubt in 10 million women in the next 10 years and replace that with confident communication skills. So let's all transform from self-doubt to self-confidence. That's my goal.
Well, and it's more than your goal. It is truly your mission. You're doing it.
Yes.
I mean, you're out there doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason why it was so easy to invite you to the show, and all my friends showing up here. Thank you all so much.
I know.
It's wonderful to have all these people. Sandra is in Nigeria. So, she is interrupting the middle of her day to be with us. So fabulous to have everyone. And I loved this thing that Lori said about you feel the electricity in your body. And I think we should dig into that a little bit, Karen. Like, let's talk about somatically. Like, in that moment, you got all of this, like, it's like a lightning storm. I call it, my favorite thing I say to my clients is, it's like that moment in The Wizard of Oz when Mrs. Gulch is on the bicycle and she's in the middle of the tornado, and she's pedaling and she's just all swirling around her. But there is something that happens in our body. What do you remember about what you felt in your body in that moment in the boardroom?
Yeah, I mean, that the stomach in knots, my throat just feeling so constricted, and also this almost paralyzation because I knew what I was supposed to present wasn't the right time and place for it, but I didn't say anything. And again, it's that feeling. And so if we juxtapose that feeling of the stomach and knots, the throat all constricting, to the freedom that we feel. Because at the end of the day, when I think about my mission and when I think about empowering women and just for all of us, the feeling of freedom is this feeling of just your whole body just relaxing, like the exhale. And so when we get to that place, I mean, think about it too. We're in so much better service to the world. And I love that quote. I think it's by Marianne Williamson. Is it something like, don't go out and try to find what the world wants, figure out what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Ooh, I don't know that I have heard that quote, but that's powerful. If somebody wants to reference check us on that one, like,
Yes.
or knows more details, like hit us up in the comments. And so, based on your story and Gail, how many of you like that brain freeze
Yes.
moment, that just feeling of disconnection? That's the way I would describe it. For
Yes.
me, it's this moment of I just don't even feel like I can get my brain and my mouth and I feel so disconnected. Like my body's in one place, my head's in another place, and I don't know. I'm a different way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And where you just feel that stuckness, where you can't really move. It's like being in quicksand in a way of just, ugh. And I think about, I heard the other day, just hearing the word sometimes out loud, the cost of silence. I heard that the other day, and it's one of those things that where you just go, oh my gosh, there's such a big price to pay. And actually, I'm thinking back to a time when I used to be in a performing group, and I remember we were in our staging process, all on these big risers back in my 20s, and there were 150 people sitting after a long rehearsal, and the director was up front with his flip chart thingy, or not flip chart, but clipboard. And he kind of was frustrated. He goes, shoot. He goes, well, we have this speaking part and looks like we don't have anybody assigned to that. Who would like to do this speaking part? And everything in my body wanted to raise my hand, but I hesitated. And the woman next to me raised her hand. And for the entire year that we were touring together, I had to watch her speak that part every performance, which was every 3 days for a year. And
I feel that in my heart, Karen. I feel that in my heart. I mean, how many people, again, if you were watching this replay live with us, whatever it is, and my apologies to my Facebook people, we somehow lost our Facebook connection and you're not getting to see this. But how many of you have been in that moment where you wanted to, and you listened to this story inside of your head that prevented you from raising your hand?
Exactly. It's so common, isn't it? And
I watched that happen with jobs. I remember in my career when I was still in corporate, I didn't give myself permission. The story I had in my head, it was that I was not allowed to raise my hand. I had to wait for somebody else to point at me and say, I think you're good enough. I think you should apply for this job. I think, we should consider you for that, something like that, because it's I don't know why. It's just a story that I had in my head that I couldn't. Yeah. There was something wrong about putting my name out there. I had to wait for somebody else to tell me it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
To anoint me.
Yeah. That's good. And I would say that most of us, especially as women, we've been culturally conditioned for that we have to ask for permission. Or if you think about the statistics around most people going for jobs, most women have to have the 10 out of 10 qualifications to say, oh, I can apply for this. And, when I think back to my past, because when I think about when I was 6 years old, my dad used to take me to flea markets and he'd say, go have fun, but never pay full price. And so I learned the art of negotiating and mostly the art of asking at an early age. And I never had a problem asking for what I wanted for the most part. And yet I grew up in this traditional home. So my mom was very submissive to my dad. And I learned that, you don't have a voice unless a man tells you that you do. And so navigating those two things has been really, really challenging for sure. I see that, is it Gail found the quote?
Yes, this is the one, right?
Oh,
Or
Ruth.
no, it's
Ruth.
Ruth. Ruth.
Thank you.
There's some great comments here, but I want to go to this one that Lori posted for us
Okay.
because this I was thinking about this too. So Lori and
Mhm.
I are riding the same wavelength right here because what I heard in the setup of the story is it wasn't in the moment,
No.
right? So she's asking about how long did it take for you to process that conversation and realize that you didn't, because the story you could have told yourself, Karen, is this. See, I don't belong in the boardroom. That is just too big a space for me. I
Mm.
can't ever do that. Like that could have been where you allowed your thoughts to land, but it wasn't. And so, talk to us a little bit about how you were able to process and why you think you didn't end up one place versus where you did come to.
Well, thank you, by the way, for that affirmation. I hadn't even thought of it being the other way. So thank you. I would say that's a tough question because I'd have to say it's probably years. Yeah, I would say. So when I think about, so that happened, this is bringing me back because it was a long time ago, but it definitely years for sure. I immersed myself in a very intense growth group and took the steps necessary, getting input from the group and the facilitator, and doing some deep psychological work as well to figure that out. And it's interesting because it was actually a coach that I worked with just on a half day session. I did an intensive with this wonderful guy, and he wrote up he had a big whiteboard, and he said, Karen, you're somebody that really dreams big. And he put this cloud and he wrote dreams over on the upper right-hand corner. And then he said, but you're over here. And he put me way over on the other side of the flip chart. And then he put a shield in the middle and he put my boss's name. And he goes, your boss is in the way. But then in parentheses, he put dad. And that's when I went, what? Oh my gosh. So that was really when that was when it's like, it's interesting with personal growth work that when you have an insight that's big, then the floodgates start opening. You start real. So as soon as I had that insight, then my growth started happening very quickly because now I realized what the problem was. And that's when I really realized I've got to start. And then it's baby steps. It's
Yes.
taking those steps. And one of the things that I taught myself that I teach other women is because I was taught that you don't rock the boat. And that was a very inherent thing in me. So I taught myself a way to be diplomatic and direct. And that was to say, here's my vote. Because my boss used to say, Karen, you always come to meetings with all this research, all these things, and then you ask us, what do you think? She goes, I want to know what you think. And that was when my jaw dropped. And I remember this thing of, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to say that. What do I even think? And so I had to start getting better at that. And then saying, here's my vote felt diplomatic. And I realized after the first time I did that, I didn't die. Nobody, I didn't nobody fired me for stating my opinion.
Well, and I want to add to what you are sharing. This your dad because that, oh wow, I don't know. That's getting to that therapy thing. Like I don't know if I could cross that boundary in coaching somebody, but it was
Yeah.
clearly very powerful and probably needed to happen. But what I remember, because I know this is probably the same time frame because you and I are contemporaries of one another. We've shared similar time frame on the earth.
Yeah.
Is that when I was working at the Gap in the 2000s, and I was working in the performance management development kind of space within the human resources function. There was this huge conversation about executive presence. What is it? Who has it? In order to be on the succession plan, you had to have executive presence. And executives could look at people and say who had it and who didn't, but they couldn't really describe what the
Yes.
difference was, right?
Yes.
And so there was all of this conversation going on all the time. And so, when you're in the boardroom and you have that minute, it was not unreasonable for that to be, that's the last time you get invited, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you could get judged. And so this idea of the weight of these moments is not a fallacy in our heads. I mean, there is some actual facts and experiences that underlie that.
Yep.
But what I love about your story is that you didn't choose this moment of of fallibility to define you or your career or your potential.
Thank
And
you.
I'm curious to know, what were the experiences or things that you think allowed you to keep that into a perspective where it didn't become a label, a hat, a definition that you owned?
Well, I think a big part of that is the confidence that I had actually from my dad around the part that I've now reconciled to realize that when I know that I'm providing value, and probably like most people, we've grown up in this idea that if I produce things, that's valuable to people, but I'm not valuable just being myself. And that's the thing that I was contending with for most of my life, but I didn't know that. So I'd say one of the
Okay,
big
we got to just pause there and we got to repeat that. And we got to see some stuff in the comments. How many people have fallen prey, besides me, to this very thing that Karen just named? Name it one more time, Karen. This is super important.
Yeah, I'll name it and then I'll tell you a quick story about it because I do think it was a huge aha for me. The idea that most of us grew up that our value is attached to what we produce. So that's why I was so good. And I mean, I still think I'm good in front of my clients, but that's why at the time I wasn't integrated. The recognizing that I had value and worth just because I exist. And it was my now husband who many years back, I remember leaving my day at work, coming home, talking to him and telling him all about my day and everything that I had done. If we go back to the doing, and he just stopped me for a moment and he goes, honey, I love that you love your job. But do you know that that's not why I love you? I love you because of who you are. And I just thought, what? Never would have occurred to me. And
What a good man. What a beautiful gift to bestow to a woman trying to make her way
yeah,
in career at that moment in time, in this period of time that we're talking about. Like,
yeah,
that's so
yeah,
huge.
yeah. So I do think that has been quite a journey around recognizing that, wow, just because I'm here on this planet, I have value to people. And this is also why, as a tip for anybody, I recommend a celebration portfolio, which is making a list of two things. One is a list of your actual accomplishments, which obviously I think all of us can come up with that pretty quickly, although we don't often name them or write them down. But then the second list is your character qualities. There are reasons why people love to be around you, or it could be love to do business with you, love to go out to coffee with you, whatever it might be. Make a list of those positive qualities, because I will say that, and my background is in HR. I've never interviewed anybody that said anything other than their accomplishments. Most people don't come with, hey, I have a character strength, da 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 da, that, like, for example, people say that I'm really likable, and that's why people like to work with me on teams, because I build trust quickly. Most people don't talk like that. So not only is it helpful to have the two lists for yourself under that umbrella, again, of the celebration portfolio, but then being able to communicate your value to people, whether you're looking for a job in a job environment, or if you're looking to run a business or be a good entrepreneur with your clients. We all have to differentiate ourselves.
Thank you, Sandra. I want to jump to this this quote from Deborah, good friend of mine, Deborah, that I worked with many years ago. Be yourself. All the other seats are already taken.
Yes.
And I want to elevate this, Karen, because this is your mission. This is your purpose. This is the work that you're doing in helping women learn to embrace who they are and stand in themselves with confidence so that they can ask and reach for the things that they want. And I'm curious to know, and I think the listeners would find this valuable. What are some of the stories that people tell themselves that you hear about why they think they have to replicate somebody else instead of just being themselves?
Well, I think we are, again, going back to culturally conditioned, like somebody else is probably doing it better than me. I'm amazed at how many people, again, going back to that comparison trap, comparison is the thief of joy. We look at and I don't know why that is, honestly, Rita. Like, why is it that we are conditioned to think that we are not worthy or whatever it is? Because I was even watching a reel on Instagram yesterday that this guy was talking to Drew Barrymore, and I think he was being interviewed or something, but he was talking about the fact that imagine when you were born in the world, you are given a human to take care of the whole time. And then basically it ends up being that, the human is you. And yet we don't take care of ourselves in that way. We look at, oh, everybody else must be better. And I honestly do not know why that is. So I would welcome your thoughts.
Well, here's what I see, some of the psychology of that. And my fellow psychologists, I know Deborah is one of them. Or, if you're just an armchair psychologist, feel free to jump in and why you think this is. But here's part of what I see is that we condition children to do that at a very young age, to look outside of themselves and compare themselves to others. Well, your friend is doing this. Shouldn't you do that? Why can't you score like Johnny does when you have the soccer ball? Whatever it might be. Teachers do it in the classroom. They praise the student who has the right answer. They point to, people to be, so we are taught at a very young age to look outside of ourselves, and we get a lot of reinforced messages about that. And that input that comes to us, I mean, and if you have siblings, God help you, because your parents compare you to your siblings all the time, right?
Yes.
And so this ingestion at a young age goes super deep into our core, into our being. And it's hard to shake. It requires effort to recognize it and then to want to do the work. You wanted to do the work. Some people never recognize it, and some people just feel so overwhelmed or have some other obstacle. Sometimes the obstacle is money. You were able to hire a coach. Some people who struggle with this, they don't have the kind of income where they have the ability to do that. They don't have a company that's paying for them to get that kind of professional development. And that's why everybody should be following Karen. She posts on Instagram, as where I follow her. I follow her on Instagram and on LinkedIn, because you're going to get all of these great tips from her. So yes, she offers affordable professional development things as well. But many people, they're just not really in a position where they can pay the big dollars to go to therapy or do other things like that.
Yeah. And I was thinking too about sports or anything. There's always some bar that we're trying to reach. And like the Olympics, even, I mean, there's so much about winners and losers, unfortunately, in our society. And I think that on one hand, it's good that there's, I don't know, like that phrase, iron sharpens iron, that can be very helpful too. So it's tough because it's finding that integration so that you're not too heavily on one side where it's like nothing matters, to the point where it's, oh, it is kind of good to have some other people. Like I know people like you, Rita, you help sharpen me just because I love your content and who you are, and you inspire me. And so anyway, there's a lot of, I feel like this is a deep, deep conversation.
It kind of is. And this gets to the theme. So the episode title is
Yeah.
what is enough? And when you and I were doing our pre-conversation and thinking about how this would go, you were sharing this comparison,
Mhm.
this constant conversation that we have in our heads of being enough, as showing up as enough in our lives and the situations that we are in. And share a few tips when that is happening for you, because you catch this happening in your own brain. You said all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
How do you how do you reframe? How do you work through that so that it doesn't paralyze you?
Yeah. So I want to come back to something that Ruth said in there about, because I want to acknowledge the fact that related to that celebration portfolio, for most of us, it's easier to find evidence in our accomplishments of those things. So definitely harder to think of the character strengths. So another exercise that I would recommend is, I call it 5 and 5. It's where you you ask 5 people that you know and trust, ideally in different parts of your life, and you ask them to give you 5 positive qualities about you. And it might feel a little bit vulnerable and challenging to do that, but hopefully if you're picking the people that know you and care about you, that they will be happy to do that for you. So that would be one of my suggestions, because what's so powerful about that is that you see the themes. Most of the time that I've done this and other clients have done this, you can see that right there on paper in front of you. That's also why writing down the accomplishments rather than just thinking about them, although thinking them is a good step, but writing these things down so that it shows evidence, because we've got to be able to look at the evidence and then be able to say, wow, I have the facts right in front of me. Another thing is to notice. This is, again, just neural pathways training, or whatever you want. Again, I'm not a neuroscience expert, but training ourselves in the moment when something has happened that is good. So let's say after this talk with Rita, I hang up and say, oh my gosh, I did great on that. Or wow, I really liked that story I shared. So noticing, looking for the good, because as human beings, we're wired to look for the negative. So we have to counteract that all the time. So those are a couple of tips. And then I want to share one other exercise that's one of my favorites, which I call the Broadway Musical exercise. And by the way, Sandra, that's very kind of you to say that I'm a good singer. It's very kind. Now I'm trying to think, where has she heard me sing? But one of the things that I'd recommend is to notice the message of doubt that you say to yourself. What is that message? So a lot of times it's, I'm not good enough, or who am I to be going for this business deal, or who am I to be asking for this promotion? When you acknowledge that first, notice how typically there's a lot of low energy when we do this. I mean, I've done this in groups and have everybody go around, and it's very heavy. But to change up the neural pathways to your brain around this and take the power away from that statement, sing it like a Broadway musical. So imagine if I said, I'm not good enough. It completely, there's a little humor in there. It changes up the way your brain looks at that same message.
I
So
love that. That is amazing. That's amazing. I like, yes, yes. I can see the power of that. I can absolutely. And you can do that anywhere, anytime. Right?
exactly. I mean, maybe not in a boardroom business meeting, but
On an airplane.
yeah, I always
But
tell
you can
people,
kind of quietly do it to yourself. You know what I
yes.
mean?
I
Like
mean,
I
go
think
ahead.
there's power in doing it out loud, but I think once you've done it out loud a few times, the way neural pathways work is now you can just visualize and hear yourself in your own head, and you get the same bump
Mhm.
from that
Exactly.
activity.
And let's face it, you don't have to sing it, even though I do recommend that. And I love what who just said that about the vagus nerve. Yeah, Sharon, love that.
Oh,
That
yeah.
yeah. So one of the things that I would remind you is that you could just say it differently. Say it in a funny voice, say it in a happy voice, or smile while you're saying it. All of those things contribute to shifting that message.
Well, this reminds me of something a therapist taught my daughter when she was working through her mental health challenges that she was having as a teenager. Um, what the therapist had her do was create an image, because she was a visual artist, of her anxiety and depression. So she created a characterization of them, and then she gave them a name.
That's
And
brilliant.
and then when she recognized their voices coming up in her head, she would name the character and she would say those things in the voice. And what you said about it takes the power away.
Yeah.
When now you are distancing. You're not claiming that as this is me. Your thought isn't you. Because the whole
Mhm.
reason we're having these conversations on the story I'm telling myself is that our thoughts are not us.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what her therapist taught her. That thought doesn't have to be you. And you
Mm.
need to separate yourself. And so
Yeah.
whether you sing it in a chorus, whether the visual that the therapist gave my daughter works for you, this idea of being able to sort of almost like compartmentalize that in some way so that you
Mhm.
get some distance from it is how you begin to take the power away from it.
Yeah, exactly. You're reminding me of another exercise, which is to do a fear script. So you write down what fear is saying to you, and then you write back to fear as the highest version of yourself. And that script, writing it down, especially writing it with a pen, helps to engage that kinesthetic sense. And doing that can even enhance the power of that exercise. And it's fascinating what can come out of that. And to your point, like you're talking about with the different characters, that it takes the power away because you're realizing, yeah, it's just a voice. That fear doesn't have to be you. So
You've given so many wonderful tips. I mean, just incredible. But I want to make sure before people have to jet away from this, I want
yeah.
to make sure that because we can continue on for a few minutes after this, we need to. But Karen, tell people the best way to connect with you, what you're up to, ways that they can get more of these amazing insights that you share all the time.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Sharon, for the shout out. So, my website for sure, there is a free download on there, a free guide, which is 9 words to avoid and what to say instead. So, for example, words like just or little, I'll give you a tip right now. A lot of times we use the word just as a minimizer, and same with little. For example, I just want to share a little tip with you, Rita, versus I want to share a tip, or share the tip without even putting a precursor to it. But sometimes we add in these words like kinda, sorta, maybe, and it takes away. So I've got phrases as words in there. So KarenLaus.com is my website. I also have a podcast called Ignite Your Confidence. And I created a signature framework called the Confidence Cocktail. And I don't have this public, but if anybody wants to take the Confidence Cocktail self-assessment, feel free to reach out to me. Again, you can find my contact info on my website, or you can email me at karen@karenlaus.com. And lastly, I have a book, which is a guidebook for women to grow their influence through confident communication. And it is called Trust Your Own Voice.
Trust your own voice. I'm getting these in the comments.
Oh, thank you, Rita. Appreciate it. Yeah, I
Get the
always like to
book.
tell people I wrote a book that I would read, meaning I like I like the hardcore tips right away. So you don't have to read it in any order. You can pick what sounds good to you, like How to Stop Rambling and Get to the Point is one of my chapters. And
Yeah, yes. It's a
and
great book. I will
oh,
vouch.
thank
It
you.
it is a fabulous book. And you and I have very similar writing styles. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah. So and if you follow Karen on LinkedIn, your newsletter comes out on LinkedIn as well, right?
Not at
Um,
this point.
okay.
So
So
I
that's
do
a
lots of tips. And then
subscribe over on the website if you want to get Karen's. Here's the website again, and of course we'll try to get these out in the comments and show notes for everyone.
Oh,
But
Rita, can I mention one other thing?
yeah,
I
go
forgot
for
about
it.
this, but I have, for anybody that's interested in growing through a group experience, I have a mastermind for executive women that is called the Powerhouse, and we meet twice a month. So if anybody's interested in something like that to help grow your influence and advance your career, it's primarily corporate executive women. But I wanted to put that out there if that's of interest to anyone.
And that the details for that are on your website, right?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
KarenLouse.com, folks. There's lots of good stuff there. Lots and lots of good stuff there.
Well, Rita,
Hey,
I want
my
to
friends at the Social Boutique are here. Yay! Great to see you guys.
I love all the people that showed up. That's fantastic. So
It
exciting.
is. Yeah, keep raining the love on Karen. You've made this a really extraordinary first episode. So many things, like I'm thinking I should have already had her website like preloaded in the comments and ready to drop. And I'm learning so much. So like, here we go. It's the imperfect perfect that we're doing today. And thank you for saying yes to do that to me. And listen, if you are tuning in to this episode, I have a couple of requests for you.
Okay.
I have a YouTube channel. It's at Ignite Extraordinary. This live stream is now on that YouTube channel as a podcast. So you can send folks there if they're not big LinkedIn users. Unfortunately, I had Facebook somehow didn't connect. So if you know people that need this show in their life, they can already watch on repeat. They can watch it here, but they can also go to YouTube. And if you guys help me out and we get subscriptions up, we'll get a lot more traction and play to other people that haven't found us yet, but need to find us. So please, thank you for commenting. Please like and share. Please recommend the show. We're going to be back every week going forward with 2 to 3 episodes a week. So look for those popping up in your LinkedIn events, or you can see them. There'll be a list as they're getting created. They'll be set up in the YouTube account so you can see what is coming up. There are so many wonderful people just like Karen in my network. If you need to steal great people for your network, come troll through, connect with me and come troll through my connections, because I have the best network on the planet. And we started out with a bang with Karen. Thank you for saying yes and for being here. And please check out all the wonderful work that Karen is doing. Final words you want to share with folks, Karen?
Trust yourself. We too often look to everybody else I still notice myself doing it. Wow, why did I listen to that person? I should have listened to myself. Remember that you are a great source of wisdom and you know best what you need most of the time.
See, this is why Karen and I get with why we're like soul sisters, because we are all about personal agency. Like, you don't have to look outside of yourself. You know, a lot of the resources that you need, and it's the law of attraction. When you start, I will kind of call it the circle of influence, right? When you start to focus on your circle of influence and your agency and your power, it grows. Yeah. It grows, and you're able to influence more and more things in your life. And this podcast is evidence of that in my own life. So thank you all for joining us for the premiere. It's time to let you get on about your day. Thank you so much. Let's see, next week, I should say, and again, I'm not prepared. So let me grab my calendar real quick and tell you who's on deck for next week. So our first episode next week is with Gail Kraft, who's been in the room with us today. Gail is an amazing woman. My friends call her a badass, because she is. I mean, she's just a business badass woman, but on an amazing spiritual journey. And she is the next one up, and that is at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, the 4th. And then we have a second episode next week, but I think maybe on the 6th or I don't know where it is. But oh yeah, it's Sandra from Nigeria is with me on Wednesday the 5th. So we're international, like we're doing the big thing, because that is what this platform allows us to do. So so you're going to want to hear Sandra's story, and she is lifting up other women, which is just incredible. What she is up to, and that is Wednesday at noon Eastern time. So more to come. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Karen. And with that, I'm gonna hit the outro here, and we're gonna close our premiere episode. I just feel so loved. Thank you for being with us.